to finish up with the chief's report, we took delivery of the emergency response vehicle that we spent a lot of time talking about.
Back?
What's that? No, this thing. It's in a secret location in the city. It's actually
Your driveway.
no. I don't think it. I mean, it could. It would wreak havoc on my lawn to turn that thing around in my backyard. So it's as the head of the head of maintenance at Department of Public Works said, one way to think of it is as a big Ford F-550 pickup truck with 8 toolboxes on the back, which is an exact clinical definition of what it is. But it's a big, really, really well-built vehicle, very, very high-quality construction. Select Design did the design work on it. It looks stunning. And until we're ready to roll it out properly, no pun intended, we're going to keep it at streets undercover. Because if I parked it here or there, people would say, what the heck is that thing? And the officers aren't trained to drive it yet. It hasn't been filled with equipment yet. We haven't certified cops on the various tools. So we want to do that in a fairly organized manner, hopefully by the community barbecue, just so we can show it to the public there and have a press conference. But I took my wife to see it. I say, our baby's in the nursery, let's go visit it. So we go to DPW. But it's an exciting thing. I think it's, considering that it would take the Vermont State Police, like at least, how long would you say it would take the tactical team to get to Burlington? Like an hour?
At least an hour minimum.
And they have a very force-oriented approach. We don't want to wait that long, and we want to be able to make sure that the police work is done in a way that we can abide by. So this thing, even if it's just sitting there in the lot, which is not our intention, and we'd like it to be out rolling, it would take a few minutes to get all of this good equipment to the scene, and cops who know how to use it. So hopefully that'll be good for crisis outcomes, but that's happening.
So this will only go out into a call for a crisis. It's not.
No, I want it to be out on because we're dealing always with the staffing issue. So this truck can be driven. I mean, it's not this. It's a long line. I mean, it's a really durable chassis. So what I don't want is for the truck to always be at the precinct, at the station house, and then cops have to get to the scene, see it's a crisis, and then get back in their cars and go get the truck and bring the truck back. I worry that things will unfold pretty quickly, and I worry that they'll just be biased towards, let's just solve it with what we have. So when we have adequate staffing, which should be, I'm just making up a number, but it's about like half the time or 2/3 of the time, I'd like officers to be on patrol in the truck so they can handle police business. But if it's not a full-size fire apparatus, I mean, it's bigger than an ambulance, but it's smaller than a fire truck. And when I say bigger than an ambulance, not much bigger, it's just a bit longer. I think like for argument's sake, the box on the back of the ambulance is about the same size as the cargo body. But unlike an ambulance, there's 4 doors instead of 2, just to give you like a visual. You'll see it soon enough. So then if it's out there going, the cops are there with it and they bring it with them to the emergency. I mean, that's the model in many larger cities, and I want to see the extent to which we can have that model here.
So this thing, we can expect to see being just driven around.
Right.
Not just responding to emergency.
Right. So I mean, yes, that's right. With the expectation that the equipment's all there on the roll, right? There's been more than one occasion where cops could have benefited from equipment, and it either took a while to get there or they said, I don't have it with me, so let's just try to solve that.
So people drive, the officers that are driving it though, I mean, are they engaged in what they otherwise would be engaged in if this vehicle wasn't here?
Yeah, the one thing they can't engage in pursuits with the vehicle, and when they has lights and sirens, they can't barrel to an incident, but they can still do police work in it. Yeah, there are regular patrol officers, but they've received training on the equipment and in the truck, and also the plan is for them to also have crisis negotiation and hostage negotiation training as well. So it's about knowing how to operate the truck, maintain the equipment, use the equipment, and be trained in de-escalation. We solicited volunteers, and I think about 30, so about over half of our patrol force requested to be qualified to drive the vehicle. Not just drive it, but to be a person who can do it. And it's not a SWAT. I mean, there is there are helmets in the back. We discussed this, but it's not the whole thing is as far as lethal weapons go, I mean, there'll be the same. There maybe be 2 additional firearms on the truck, more than what 2 cops in a cruiser would have now. Like they'd have a sidearm and a rifle. Here we'd have a sidearm, a rifle, and a shotgun. So it's not for each. So it's not like a weapons platform, and it's not armored, and you can't fight from it. I mean, are you worried that, is there a concern about it being used, like, on the roll?
Well, we all talked about it,
Yeah.
early on about what it was gonna look like and
Yeah.
what the impression in the community was going to be, and I guess I was under the impression that it would be more used in moments where it was needed and not day-to-day driving around town as part of like just another cruiser, except it's this, rather larger
Right.
vehicle. But now I'm hearing that may not be the case.
No, I mean, I'm sorry if that was, I
I'm
think
just
I've
telling
been.
you what I recall. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not saying
I've
you
been
misled us or
clear
anything.
that the intent, when we have adequate staffing, is to always have it on the road. And that's just to minimize, to number one, create the expectation that it be used, to make sure that it gets there in time to use it, and to make sure officers understand that this is equipment that should be brought to the scene immediately. And to not have to have them, like, they could create a perimeter because there's a barricaded suspect, and then two officers say, I have to leave this perimeter and go back and get the truck and then come back here. That may be the case if we're short-staffed, but if we have enough people to just have the truck to begin with, I'd like them to bring it with them to the crisis rather than have to go back and get it. Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like we gotta, yeah, I mean, if you introduce it as such, and, everybody understands that, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, no, and one of the
Public,
things,
And then you're gonna bring it out to the.
they'll be able to see what's in it, right?
Right.
There's no, like, we can't open this, and if you open it, there's, like, grenades and a rocket launcher in it. There's no, It's power tools and,
Right.
and ballistic shields and, when we talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that we've, including yourself, was sensitive to how the community
Yeah.
was going to respond to this. So I think the more visible it is on a day-to-day basis, may translate into it being more acceptable, or it may want.
No, right.
generate
So
more
that it could be
concern.
this idea that folks get used to it. But what I feel about this is that people demand like rapid and effective de-escalation and isolation and containment, and that's not just verbal. That requires the cities with adequate budget to feel like a real de-escalation program and isolation and containment for mentally ill people and barricaded people in crisis, fugitives and suspects and all that, have these apparatus and they have them deployed quickly on the road. They drive around in them. And the driving around part notwithstanding, what I'm trying to say is that when, to meet these demands, we have this equipment. And I find it incongruous that Burlington would say, we demand this, this, and this, and this, but then when professionals bring that about, we don't want to see what it looks like, right?
I don't think it's a matter of not seeing what it looks like. It's just, I think it's more a question of what its function was. And I guess
Right.
I had the impression that it was meant to be something that could go and serve the safety of officers
Right.
at crises, and that it was not going to be just another vehicle to drive around town in, sort of, and do your normal policing work. And it sounds like that's assuming there's adequate staffing.
say the way that- yeah.
Instead of two officers, say, or an officer being in a cruiser driving around, he or she will now be in this larger vehicle driving around.
Right.
And that makes it a much more visible object. I mean, I think
Sure.
if there's a crisis in the North End and people see this vehicle there and people pulling equipment out of it, I mean, that makes complete sense.
Right.
If they're just seeing it drive through their neighborhood, they may start to wonder, well, what have we become if this is the norm? And I guess I
Right.
didn't understand that it was going to be more.
But
of a-
what have we become?
Well, I mean, it would appear to, and I haven't seen it yet,
Right.
and that's why we were concerned about the size of it. But
You've
it's just
become
not
a
a
city
cruiser.
that
It's not a
has-
cruiser. It's a much larger police vehicle, and I don't know what people will view of it. That's one of our concerns.
There'll be a lot of different things people will view of it, but I mean, I'm saying we become a city that has isolation and containment and negotiation and less than lethal equipment like constantly available in a durable platform that'll last for a decade. Like that's the city we've become, and bear in mind, like I severed our relationship with the Department of Defense because I don't believe in the over-militarization of policing. But I also don't believe, and I'm not saying you said this, I'm maybe talking about people who are harsher critics, that there's something like de-escalation dust that we just sprinkle on things. Like we do a physical job where seconds count. I mean, the reason, we acknowledge that seconds count in this and that expectations count and having the equipment there immediately matters. And so I guess I'm trying to split that. I'm looking at the best practice, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is having this on the roll with the level of staffing that we have. And it would stay at the station house in cases where we just didn't have enough staffing to meet like a minimum cruiser patrol requirement and put it out, because it requires 2 cops. So if you had like 5 cops working that night, I wouldn't have like 2 in this thing and then another 3 for the whole city. But if you have 7 or 8 or 9 cops, it would make sense. And so we'll have to see. I mean, I'm not insensitive to your concerns, because they're real. I just think we need to at least give the community an opportunity to understand what the vehicle is and what it represents and why we have it, and let them, react to that and express opinions, right?
Yeah, I mean, that seems to me the key is getting that out there, letting people see it and see what it's for.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not an offensive